Uh, caste was actually introduced into India by the British during this census to, create and classify people so that they could monitor and manage the large population of India and the extraction economy that they came in to perpetrate in India. So, when people drop the caste bomb and try to, say it's, the whole anti-Brahmanism, Brahmins were equally colonized by the British. So we were the oppressed, we were the people, entire populations of India were oppressed in various ways. So with that, I want to introduce our two speakers, Shri Iyer ji and Dr. Praveen Sinha. Dr. Praveen Sinha is he's a professor in California, and he lives in the Orange County, and is very active with his Indian American Association in Orange County. And Dr. Praveen Sinha has done a lot of work analyzing some of the caste issues that have come up, and also the surveys that have come up. So I think, Dr. Praveen Sinha, welcome, and so glad that you could make it despite a delayed flight. And since morning I've just said Vigna Vinashaya Namaha. So I just feel that Ganpati has worked a lot of these. There were a lot of things that always need ironing out when you run a conference, and I think of them as little miracles. So welcome. And Shri Iyer ji, everybody knows you. Shri Iyer ji, welcome. And Shri Iyer ji runs a channel called P Gurus, and I write for P Gurus, and I have also done a couple of interviews there. And Shri Iyer ji always does so many important, relevant Indian American issues are highlighted on his channel. And he's, of course, a tech entrepreneur and has many patents in his name. And, we all know and love watching your show. I think it's one of my favorite channels to watch. Shri Iyer ji, I'm so glad you could make it. And you interact with so many people on so many issues. And, you are so close to this issue. I know you covered live some of the protests that we did on caste when it was playing out in California. So maybe I will start with you, and we can do, I can ask both of you, for maybe if you take a couple of minutes to answer. California seems to be obviously, the center point of a lot of the caste issues that have come up. And I just want to know your take on it. What is driving it? I think if both of you can pitch in on that topic.
First off, in my opinion, it's a lot of mischief created by a few entities. The one that comes to my mind right away is a place called Equality Labs, one person driven company. However, this person seems to be extremely well networked, and right now appears much bigger than what you should really take into account what they have accomplished. They have put out a report which is basically flat lies, and this person who says that she represents the Dalits in the of India has never gone to India. She has grown up all her life in the United States. So if somebody starts looking a little bit deeper, you will find that there is a whole bunch of fake narrative construction that has taken place. But let's leave that aside for a moment. Sometimes what happens is, people are fair-minded. When the one side doesn't say anything and the other side says, look, there is a discrimination here, it is based on caste, and here is the person who's a victim, then the California state, which has a system for this, it has a grievance cell, and they went ahead and filed a lawsuit. Interestingly, it was against Cisco. And what happened was that lawsuit, they withdrew that lawsuit. And the reason I believe that they withdrew, and primarily the fact was that they didn't quite understand what the caste discrimination was. Completely off the charts here. And when my detailed turn comes, I will explain a little bit more. I have done some research. I have to just present a quick infographic of 5 or 6 date lines when things happen, where we can go back and give you proof that this is how India was. So I think I'll like to stop here, but I look forward to speaking in more detail about all this stuff.
Thank you, Shri Iyer ji. I think I'll go straight after Dr. Praveen. I know we'll take the infographic slightly at the end.
Okay, sure.
Right?
Sure.
Because it's the positive story. It's sort of, first let's discuss what the issue is, and then, right?
Yeah.
Or do you think it's a good time to share it early on?
No. This forms the basis of my lecture. So whenever my turn comes, and you tell me to do it, and then, but I would like to hear Pradeep ji give his opening statement. So go ahead.
Praveen ji, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Richa, for inviting me here. Can you all hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. Good to see you, Shriji. I was asked by Richa yesterday to talk about some of these caste-related issues, and specifically talk about the various surveys that have come about. So what I'll do is I'll take a couple of minutes to go through those surveys, give you the broad results that were found in those studies, and then Shriji can take it a little bit further into other issues that come out of that. As Shriji mentioned earlier, there is an outfit called Equality Labs, a very nefarious organization which seems to have only few characters, but if you look at the scope and depth of what they have done, it is very obvious that this is very well funded and a very well orchestrated propaganda machine. So the other characters are probably not visible to us, and they are staying in the background. And I'll be happy if we do a little bit more digging and some investigation is done to figure out where the funding is coming from, because most of it is fairly hidden and not in a public site. They did a survey in 2018, which became the start of this trouble that we are all facing. They did a total bogus study of about 1,500 respondents. Where they got them, nobody knows. It was a totally unscientific survey in which they ended up deleting a lot of observations, about 300 or so, coming to 1,200 that suited what they wanted to state. And the net result was very simple. There's discrimination everywhere in the US. You go to any Indian community, it's full of discrimination. People see nothing but caste. Very soon it became clear when you read the methodology that it's all bogus, the way the sample was selected. Just to those who are not familiar with the whole idea of surveys and we look at them, just keep one thing in mind. Survey is a very serious science. When you have got millions of people, about 4 million Indians living in the US, and you want to make a statement about how they behave, you need to do that in a way that your sample, which in this case is pretty small, 1,200, though not that small, has to represent the population. If the sample simply represents the people whom you chose, who engage in certain behavior, so 1,200 out of 4 million, just think about how small that number is. I can produce any result I want. I literally can, you tell me what you want and I can reproduce it for you. If the survey is not scientific, and this is absolutely non-scientific survey.
Yeah.
So all the findings that came from this survey pointed out to our community in serious trouble, as if we are nothing but horrible people who don't see anything else but all the bad things in each other, and we are out to destroy each other. When anybody who has lived in this diaspora knows that we are a very, very peaceful community, law-abiding community, hardworking community, a community that has helped each other to grow and become the highest earning household income community in the US. We are a model minority. And when a model minority represents a powerful country like India, you can easily imagine a lot of people will not be happy. And Equality Labs is one such outfit. And I'll let Shriji give it more details about them, about how nefarious they are. So that survey really set the tone for the case in Cisco, which, as Shriji pointed out, was withdrawn. But it has not gone away. It has taken taken its ugly head out wherever they can. And a lot of us in the Indian community got really concerned because we knew it was propaganda to start with. So actually, I was about to start a survey myself to basically debunk this, and we got everything in place till we found a new survey came out from Carnegie. So I want to talk about the Carnegie survey because that is a true and real survey. It was again about 1,200 people, but just underline my word, representative sample. They went through.
I think what they used as the random stratified sampling methodology, right? Which basically they were able to represent the Indian. I just want to quickly point out that they also debunked the Equality Labs survey, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So when we say representative sample, means the sample should represent what the population looks like. And as Richaji pointed out, there's several ways of doing that. And one of the best ways is to stratify and then randomly select within the stratified groups, which is exactly what they did, accounted for each and every observation they got, and found extremely interesting and good results. The results simply pointed out that, I mean, as usual, as you'll expect, there was some discrimination they filed, but it was not on the basis of caste. The people sort of separated the Indian population into two groups. About 1/3 found there was a discrimination. And the number one discrimination they said was on the basis of skin color. And that too, it was more prevalent among the Indians who were born here than those who were coming from India. But you know, skin color discrimination, I mean, it's a very tough thing to decipher to some extent because there are a lot of preferences that exist in society. Even if you go to Western society and take a survey, you'll find blondes are discriminated. We'll say they have preferred over brunettes or what have you. These are characteristics that human beings by very nature will do it. But the number of people claiming discrimination was quite small. There was some
I remember that the sample size was so small that they were not even, it wasn't even projectable data. So they basically mentioned that at the bottom of their charts.
Very good. And then the caste one was very interesting. A very small proportion did report some caste discrimination, but the odd part was when asked who was discriminating, it turned out equal number of Indians versus non-Indians were discriminated.
Right.
So that was the oddest part of the result. So some of these results have to be taken with the internal consistency that did not exist. So I'll just simply state in very simple terms that the Carnegie survey literally debunked all the findings of the Equality Lab survey, which said there's a massive discrimination on the basis of caste and what have you. The results, which are more scientific, show totally a very opposite picture. And I believe that survey, as it takes place in the local law enforcement agencies, especially courts, will throw all the cases that are coming out based on Equality Labs. It's only a matter of time. So yes, these people are nefarious. They hit and run. So this was one hit and now they're going to run away. And as we saw here, there's another hit that is happening on this debunking Hindutva that is going on right now, or dismantling Hindutva. I expect these attacks to keep coming. I don't think this is the last. The key thing is we need to understand what their next move is, and we need to be prepared for it. Some of us are working on it.
Praveenji, I also want to point out that all of the news and media reports, all of the resolutions that are coming up in the universities, they're all being, they all quote Equality Labs. So the clout that this organization has, how they've penetrated into big tech through their tech security, and messaging that they have and the work that they do on security, tech security, they are penetrated into big tech. They are penetrated into universities, right? Where all of these resolutions, whether it was in California State, whether it was the Santa Clara, they pretty much pitched it to the Santa Clara Human Rights Council. And so people who don't know or have not followed, these are just some of the resolutions that we have seen. Brandeis has quoted them. Brandeis actually implemented it on their campus and in their, within their charter. I don't know what the university has, but they have included caste as a category of discrimination there. And then, of course, California universities have tried to pass it. At least the student bodies have passed it, but it has to still go to the faculty senate. And we really countered that very strongly that, when the student body was passing it. So that, and also the Human Rights Council, Santa Clara Human Rights Council, when they tried to pass this resolution, which would have actually made it move further into the legislative process in the city councils, I think a lot of resistance came through. And Shri Iyerji, you were there to cover it, right? You covered that. Actually, usually you were in your studio, but you actually went down on the street where we were protesting. A lot of our friends and people were out there. So I just want you to give us a little bit of understanding of what you think of these resolutions, and the fact that also Kadem has added caste internally as a protected category, which is the California Democratic Party. So I think maybe I will hand over the floor to you to talk about that. I know we do want to talk about Pew Research a little bit, just maybe, and I'll come back to you, Dr. Praveen. And but Shri Iyerji, maybe you can present your infographics as well. But first, tell us about Kadem and tell us about the protest you covered briefly.
Absolutely, and I was there the day before the Human Rights Council of Santa Clara County was going to listen to this application, petition, and so on. It was an online petition, and you heard like, I think 300, 400 people, all from different walks of life. The interesting thing was many of those people who were complaining about caste discrimination were not Hindus or Sanatanis. So it was a really odd mixture. And the amazing thing, I have to tell you this, Richaji, amazing thing is the same set of people will show up for every protest, even remotely connected with India or the government of India. If, for example, the Indian consulate holds a program, there was a program, I think, celebrating the 400th birth anniversary of Guru Gobind Singh. And these people are there protesting. It's raining, and we're having a really nice session inside, and these people are protesting outside. And you can hear the voices over the spattering of water, rainwater. Anyway, this is like the same set also showed up there. There was no resolution or recommendation done. They've essentially, that thing has been disbanded. They're trying to put together one more thing, and they're trying to come back and see what to do. But the first committee also accepted that this is a much deeper topic than what they thought it was. It is not as black and white as they thought, or they were told or given to understand by who? Equality Labs. So let's first take, for many of the viewers here, you may not know how India's system evolved. Basically, there were two rishis, Rishi Bhrigu and Rishi Bharadwaj, and they met together to discuss how to form a stable society. Then Rishi Bhrigu said, there are 4 sources of power in a society, and we must ensure that nobody has more than one of that. The 4 sources are knowledge, weapons, wealth, and land. These should not be in one hand, not even 2 should be in one hand. So those who have knowledge will not have wealth, and those who have wealth will not have weapons, and those who have weapons will not have lands. Those who will have weapons will rule the country, but they will not make the policy. They have to go to the people having the knowledge to seek their permission and advice. This vyavastha was there for thousands of years. I mean, we don't even know when it started, but I'm going to show you as a quick infographic that gives you some date points. And these are, let me see, I need to, all participants, I need you to give permission, Richaji.
Yes, let me see.
You should see advanced sharing options, all participants, because it's not allowing me to. Okay, got it now. I got it now.
Okay.
All right. Let me see. Advanced. Let me see if I can get this. Give me 1 second. I have got it here. All right. Are you able to see it? Because I can't see it.
I think, yes, we can see it.
Okay. So I'm going to just speak to this for a minute. So yeah. The earliest record of what a Varna system meant is recorded in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna explains the Varna system to Arjuna. And he says, Chaturvarnayam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Dibhagashaha. I won't go into the entire thing, but what essentially says is that these were 4 varnas that were created by me, and these are not based on birth, but you will be taking up this based on what you choose as a vocation. Essentially, one of the precepts here, which is not clearly mentioned, is that everybody is born as a Shudra. And then based on what you learn from different gurus, whichever Gurukul you go, at that point you choose what your vocation is to be, and that becomes your Varna. Now, I'm going to fast forward a few thousands of years, and I have here a book. I don't know if you can see that. It's called the Tamil Nadu, the Land of Vedas. In this, I have page 403.
It hasn't transitioned. I don't think so. It's still dates.
1000 CE. 1000 CE.
Okay.
That is 1080. Yeah, that is 4,000 years later. This is, the king was Rajaraja Chola. He's considered to be the greatest Chola emperor. And there is a copper plate issued by him on how his administration was organized. And it is given in page 403 of this book, The Land of Vedas, by Padma Bhushan awardee Dr. R. Nagaswamy. And it counts that 70% of the administration jobs in the Chola administration were occupied by Shudras, about 15% by Kshatriyas, and about 14% by the Brahmanas. This was how the allocation of work, the administration was done. Now, let's, and there are many other places where you can find this thing. I have another finding here. This is very close to the city of Chennai, a place called Porur, where they are talking about how land was provided to anyone. Everybody who got a plot was always given 800 square feet. That was the regular plot size. And it did not matter whether you were a Brahmana or a Vaishya or a Shudra or a Kshatriya. This was the size of the plot given, and this was given, distributed equally to whoever was deserving. So if you look at anything where there is proof, meaning like either it's a stone, cast in stone, or on copper, you can see that these varnas were coexisting and they were doing extremely well. Now let's fast forward 700 years more. In 1822, a detailed survey of the Gurukul system was conducted by various British officers of the East India Company. And this is just recounted in a book called A Beautiful Tree by Dharampal, and where they find region after region, the majority of enrolled students were Shudras. And the regions are captured not like modern day states, but they were captured by the language that region was speaking. Odissi speaking region, Telugu speaking region, Tamil speaking region, and so on and so forth. But the consistent thing one found was that the enrollments were high. It spread across all, I don't want to use the word caste, but all 4 varnas, and it was based on the needs. Whoever wanted what, they got that. Now, we should remember that it was this that Lord Macaulay broke. I mean, he completely smashed it. 126 universities that were there were completely razed, and a new system that was based on English was forced down the throat of the Akhanda Bharat people. And in fact, the word caste is not even an Indian word, it's a Portuguese word, which means class. And the Portuguese arrived in India in 1498. So before that, so what people tend to do is they loosely associate the caste with another word called jati, a word that is actually used to denote someone's speciality. And some case, this commonality is a context. Like, for example, a jati of weavers. It didn't mean that each one is a weaver, but it was a group. Maybe somebody was specialist in silk, somebody was specialist in cotton, and so on and so forth. How did the word jati come? It is believed that the Sanskrit word Vigyani, which is a scientist, over time changed to what is called as Gyani, someone who is knowledgeable. And then also to jati over the time, because you have a little bit of gyani required you to put more stress on how you pronounced it. So it became jati. In fact, this is true because if you look at some of the names that we have today, for example, I'm just going to give you 2 or 3 commonly found names across India. One is what is called as Potadhari. A Potadhari was somebody who was a specialist at metallurgy. And now you will see names, last name, Podar or Fotedar, and various variations of that over India. Same way, somebody who was a specialist was called Sreshthi. Sreshthi became over time Seth, Sethi, Chetti, Chettiar. All these things are the same group of people who are practicing this varna. I can go on. Many such names come where the name evolved from what kind of a specialty they had. So to put the two together.
Can I interrupt you just 1 second?
Yeah.
Just to give you a sense, this is exactly what happened in Europe also. The most common name in the Christian word is Smith.
Smith, yes.
And Smith is actually a short for people who engaged in the professions of goldsmith, ironsmith, what have you. Another common name that you will see is like Fisher. Very common last name. These are all fisher people who belong to the Jati of fishery.
Right.
So what we saw in India is nothing unique to India. It was happening all over. It's just that somebody chose to pick on us and demonize. Sorry, Shriji, you can please go ahead now.
No problem at all. I'm almost at the end of my infographic. In 1874, so remember that 1857, the first war of independence took place and the British government took over control. And then they started systematically looking at who were the people who were supporting this independent war. And the first thing they found was the big landed farmers. They were supporting it. So what did they do? They tried to smash them up by bringing in what is called as the zamindari system. In the zamindari system, they found the ruffian of that particular area and they told him, you can do whatever you want. This is your area. This is your responsibility. You need to give us so much as tax, and how you do it is up to you, whatever you want to do. So that is how zamindari system evolved across many states in India. Now, the other thing they did was in 1870s, and specifically in 1874, they passed this law called the Criminal Tribes Act. And it was aimed at some communities who were commodity distribution specialists. Let me give you an example. Many of us always wonder in awe at how your breakfast, your lunch gets taken from your home 40 kilometers away in a Mumbai suburb and reaches you exactly without fail, no mistake, and it will pass through 10 different hands. So basically, these are all people who know how to distribute commodities. Turns out, up until that time, there were a group of communities who were the people that you went and sold your produce to, and they kept meticulous figures. You can give them rice, they'll give you back the money, and after 6 months, 4 months, whatever be the time. But these communities, they worked together. They knew which region needed more rice, which region needed more wheat, and they had a way of making sure that the farmer got the best price for his produce. So they basically discriminated this group, and they were called untouchable, because what they wanted to do was, behind their back, they did not want any regrouping. Now, they also looked at
Can I add one thing?
Yeah.
I've been talking to a few people who are classified as Dalits or SC/STs, and some of them were also mercenaries for the kings. So they used to fight for the kings whenever the king needed extra people in the army, and they were de-weaponized, hunted down, and they had to run into the forests. And these are the people who later became Adivasis, because there are a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them went there. Or so they led a very different life, and again, that impacted the policing systems of India were completely I just wanted to add some more jatis that
actually you segued to my next observation.
Okay.
Now, if you look at the regional language in which the police of each state is described, I'm just guessing here. Uttar Pradesh is say police in English, and it says police in Hindi. And if you take Maharashtra also, it says police. However, if you look at Tamil Nadu, the Tamil equivalent word is called Kaval, K-A-V-A-L. What Kaval is, Kaval used to be a community whose only job was to protect the village, the town, the city, what have you. this group also was banished by the British. But somehow the name stuck, and today they still remember this group as the ones who were actually the protectors of the people who lived in that area. So they were also, banished, just like you said about mercenaries. So, and it was so bad that they were segregated and they required passes. It was called as movement pass. Just like you get one in curfew, movement pass had to be obtained before they could go from one place to another. That is how scared the British were. And then in 1930, there was a pact that was signed between Dr. Ambedkar and Gandhiji, wherein they agreed that by the time the Dalits were in mainstream phrase and Dr. Ambedkar was taking up the fight, and they agreed that there shall be reservation in a free India. So we have to remember that in 1822 is when the thing of Gurukul got dismantled, the Varna system got dismantled. 1947, 125 years later, it got at least recognized to some extent to try and lift somebody. Now we are going to start this recovery process. I would say it will take another 50 years before we may come back to a situation that used to exist in India before 1820, because all the Mughal marauders, they took two things. They took gold, silver, precious jewelry, and they took women. This was their thing. They never tried to stay anywhere and try to rule and impose. Mughals did it a little bit, but again, it was always plunder, plunder, plunder. That was the main thing. Of course, Aurangzeb is in a class of his own. But essentially what I'm trying to say is that this is where India is today, and India has made a much better job at recognizing those who had fallen behind and giving them a helping hand. And to try and take this thing and put it in the United States concept is totally out of place. And it is important that everybody who wants to rule on this understand that this was what it was. But the core reason for all this, in my opinion, was that there were 22,000 Britishers who were trying to rule over 220 million people. I'm talking about the Akhand Bharat at that time. And the only way they could do that was to keep creating divisions, keep letting one person fight against the other. And wherever there was any unity, they were afraid they would go and break it up. This was the core reason why all this happened. Unfortunately, we are stuck with it. Now we are trying to find our way back, but a lot of prejudices exist. And it is important that those of us who understand history make sure that people know what is the right thing and how things existed for thousands of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Shriji. That was a wonderful summary of what, I mean, the fact is we all need that education, right? We all need that education, but at the same time, their divide and rule created such social engineering. More than that, what's important is that whatever the research comes through, whether it's Carnegie endowment, whether it's the, Pew Research, and I'll go to Dr. Praveen Sinha to explain a little bit about what caste dynamics came through in the Pew Research. But the point is that their narrative is not going to stop, and their attacks based on caste are not going to stop. That is what we have found after seeing these two. So I will let Praveen Sinha talk about the Pew Research and caste, and then we can just talk briefly about what do you think is the reason that these, don't stop, these attacks, despite the fact that, we are finding a very liberal and, non-caste theist or, people in the Hindu community through surveys.
Thank you, Richa. I'm just going to take a little segue and talk to you a little bit about the genesis of all this in the US. Shriji gave a very good background on how it evolved in India, the role of Britishers, how they used divide and rule to create a fractured society, which we are still recovering from. I'm going to talk about what happened in the US. To understand what is happening in the US, let's understand a little bit more about the history of US. The Europeans who came to USA, who founded this country, the discovery of this great country, have a very checkered past. We do not talk about hundreds of thousands of Native Americans who were killed, literally killed, butchered, and their land was taken over. That history is never talked about here, but there was a serious oppression in this country. A second equally heinous and equally despicable act was the act of slavery, in which the African Americans brought from Africa and all over the world were put in inhumane conditions and treated in a way that I don't want to describe. You should read more about it. That sin that was committed long time back has never been corrected in this country. To this date, it has not been corrected. You all have heard about Black Lives Matter. Since it is a reflection of the inadequacy of the system to fix a problem and undo the injustice of the past. The Civil Rights Bill that was passed in 1960s was attempted to fix the problem, but we know it did not do anything. And the problem still persists. I will give some credit to these people at Equality Labs and all these outfits that they saw that as an opportunity. So they clinged on to this oppression that was committed against the African Americans and put themselves in the same category, almost like a Me Too kind of a movement. You were oppressed and so were we. So we should be protected like the way you are protected. Unfortunately, our community has failed to make that separation. And let me tell you why we failed. Let's look at what did the United States do to fix the inequities of the past. The Civil Rights Bill was passed in 1960s, and that too, we all know, was highly inadequate. What did India do to fix these problems, as Sriji pointed out, created by the Britishers? India went through full frontal assault on this problem. We introduced a quota system. We simply said, we are going to fix this problem. We are not going to let this injustice that was done in the past to go without correction. And what is the result? I think we need to point out that the quota system that we introduced in India to provide reservations, people to scheduled caste, scheduled, backward category and Dalits, has shrunk that inequality that existed at the time of partition when India became independent to now significantly. We don't have that problem. Whereas in USA, that problem still exists. We need to highlight the fact that India as a country, despite being extremely poor, starting with nothing, did a lot more than this country did to fix the problem. And I will not go too much into Pew survey, but the Pew survey finds that the caste discrimination does not exist in India. Caste, it has been taken out. India has fixed its problem. But somehow, these people, as Sriji pointed out, who came from India, who did not ever go to India, are complaining of the problem in this country when none exists, as the Carnegie survey showed. So we need to change our narrative. We have to explain that we had a problem that was created by the Britishers and we did everything to fix it. It is still may not be perfect, but we have made tremendous improvements. We don't see scheduled castes and other backward categories creating movements like Black Lives Matter. We don't see them getting killed like the way it happened in the USA. So this Black Lives Matter, which is a very serious matter, which is a reflection of huge inequality and injustice in the American society, has been hijacked by these parties. I want to point out something else which is very important, and this is something we all should pay close attention to. In the university campuses, and I can tell you it will come, it's only a matter of time, there are South Asian student associations in every university. These associations have been indoctrinated into believing that South Asians are racist. They have a privilege. There's a document that is publicly available, which I was the president of Student Association at Carnegie Mellon when I was a student there. And so I remain active in that group, even though it has been a long time since I left. And I saw a document that was literally an indoctrination document for young students who attend college, to convince them that their parents are racist, that they have a privilege. And for that reason, they need to be going back homes and correcting their own parents. And it talks about how to tell your parents that they are racist, how to talk to them, how to convince them. So the point I'm trying to make here is that this is a little bit of a complicated story in which we have been juxtaposed into a problem which we have nothing to do with. But we are basically put in the same category. And when you do that, that story sells, because Americans and others who do not know so much about our culture our background, tend to easily relate that, okay, that was injustice. This Black Lives Matter is injustice in the USA. They're talking about similar injustices. It is so severe that even Oprah Winfrey has bought it. And she has promoted books which basically are propagating this narrative. So the problem is a serious one. But I think I will stop here too, because I think Richa, you want to take some questions also. But the point here is that the Pew survey has totally dismantled all those negative narratives that were being brought about India. And I'll just talk about very few of them. The biggest thing that has been propagated for the last 2-3 years is that in India, there is a huge discrimination against minorities, minority religions, especially Muslims and others. The Pew survey, which was done which included about 30,000 people, huge survey, the biggest survey ever done on India, an extremely scientific survey, found something which is unimaginable. 90% of Indians believe and respect the other religions. And I want to emphasize the word respect, not tolerate. We in the USA, we simply said our religion is supreme. I won't say me, but typically the Abrahamic religions, they believe our religion is supreme, but we'll tolerate you. In India, we have a very different culture. We don't tolerate, we respect it. And we expect the respect was mutual among both Hindu, Muslim, Sikhs, all the religions across India. It portrayed a beautiful picture of India, which is totally opposite of what the narrative that was being created in this country. The survey is very long. I won't go into the details of it in the interest of time. If Shriji wants to say a few things, he can say that. But my point is very simple. Let's understand where this is coming from. A problem that exists in the USA, which is a very serious problem, which I strongly support getting fixed, is being hijacked to artificially fabricate a problem that does not exist. And we have to fight that. That's all I have to say right now.
Thank you, Praveenji. That was pretty comprehensive. And I just want to bring out a couple of points. I think one of the points I want to bring out is that both the cases, whether it's Cisco, I think we have been, again, interacting a lot, and HAF has filed a motion to intervene. So basically, what we have understood is that it is the case obviously is filed because it is covered under the existing American law, and there is not really a need to add another protected category like caste. Secondly, BAPS, there was a case against a temple called BAPS. It was found to be a false case. It was a case against the temple, but actually the temple had subcontracted the labor issue to some Hispanic contractor, labor contractor, and so it was more a labor law issue. But the fact is that they have such a control over the media, and people don't realize it. Two things: that the media is manipulated, and the stories that come out are not completely unbiased and true, and that now you don't see that case coming up anymore. So that said, the other thing is Kadem. I don't know if anyone wants to take that and bell that cat as to why is the Democratic Party, driving these kind of agendas. Because California is definitely a huge, Democratic powerhouse right there, and Kadem is driving and already added caste as a protected category into their own personal legislative process within the party. Shriji, maybe do you want to take that loaded question?
Richa, there are people who do this thing in like a submarine fashion, in the sense that it is very, very low underneath the surface until suddenly it comes up for hearing and then a resolution is passed. You look at the 7 cities that passed the anti-CAA resolution, the resolution text is remarkably similar. And many of them have acknowledged that it was a CAIR, C-A-I-R, was the one that came to them with this and made them to pass the resolution. And some of the council members were so flippant when they were asked, how come you passed something without knowing what it was? And then they said, well, it doesn't affect us, but if we pass this, we get to earn brownie points with our party structure. So essentially every council member was thinking that this would be a growth path for them inside the party infrastructure. Now, Democrats have gotten themselves into a mess now. In fact, you are seeing the kind of havoc that is being wreaked by their progressives group. This progressives group is the one that is the mischief maker. Unfortunately, a lot of luminaries have identified themselves with it. Now are finding it hard to get out of it. Bernie Sanders, for example, but it is there. They have to figure out a way. There is a lot of manthan going on inside the party right now. You can see that the moderates are saying, look, if we do all these things, we are toast. So there is problem. It will correct itself. I think primarily, when I became a citizen in the United States, I somehow registered myself as a Democrat. But a few years back, I said, no, I don't think I'm a Democrat. This is not what I identify with. So now I'm an independent. Actually, I feel very good at that because I get less paperwork, less spam, and they think that, independents don't matter. And I'm fine with that. I can make my point and go on. So the thing is, this is a pan-US problem. You're going to start seeing Azan permission being given. I think one Azan was given in New Jersey. I know why I'm coming with this is, see, the thing is, there is a fake narrative being peddled, and this is being done to try to tug the heartstrings of people who believe in a sense of fairness, and then they suddenly feel like, oh, we're not doing this, we don't get to do this, we don't get to pray, we don't do this. So somehow, somewhere, somebody feels guilty, and then they pass the resolution. So this creep is starting to happen. But the point here is, let us make an example out of this caste discrimination suit and make sure that anywhere in future, if something like this comes up, they can say, look, this is settled. This is what it was. California went through it. And in that thing, it's good. Once California says that there is no such thing, I think you will stop. You will see the end of this. That's my hope.
Also, I just want to say there's Aarti Kaushal Chopra who works closely in the political systems in academia even, right? Aarti ji, do you want to start your video, or do you want to tell us a little bit about that? I know you raised your hand.
Okay, let me just say a few things, Richa, while she's getting ready. That there was a question about why there is a reverse discrimination against Brahmins at this time. It is important for us to understand the woke culture that is going on in the US right now, arising from the critical race theory, in which the struggle of Blacks and African Americans in this country versus against the white has been put in the context of an oppressor and oppressed class. Oppressors are the white people. According to that theory, the oppressed people could be anybody they have hurt, Native Americans or African Americans. That theory is being applied to Hinduism at this time. And in that, when that theory is applied, the oppressor class is the Brahmin. Again, a totally fabricated application of that theory in the Indian context by people who have no knowledge. So the Brahminical class has been portrayed as the oppressor class, and this other categories, which is the Shudras and all that, as the oppressed class. So a theory which is very applicable in the Western context and has literally no bearing in the India Varna system is being applied and presented in that way to the Western audience who really understand that theory very well. And that is the reason you're seeing this Brahminical reverse discrimination against the Brahmins, because suddenly they have been turned into an oppressor class. Very, very, very incorrect application, but that's the narrative that is being peddled. We need to work hard to correct it. As Shriji pointed out with various examples, it is not that way in real. It was not conceived that way. It was distorted by Britishers. That's not what it is supposed to be, and plenty has been done in India to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Praveenji. Actually, someone, I think Jayaraman Iyer has written that there is a reverse discrimination now in South India against the Brahmin community. And how can you explain that? So I think we have all heard about it, seen it in some ways, and I don't know if you want to.
I can take a stab at this.
Yeah, please.
The Brahmins in Tamil Nadu were about 3% in 1947. Now they are less than 1%. And so the reason this was done was, you have to go back and look at this party called the Justice Party that the British wanted to put up against Congress, which they thought had a lot of Brahmins in it. And the reason Congress had a lot of Brahmins in it was initially Congress was a place where a lot of lawyers were employed, and Brahmins tended to be lawyers because they see in 1822, it goes back to that point when Gurukuls got completely smashed. Others, see, the farmers had land. The people who are doing business, they had their businesses to attend to, and those who were waging wars, they ended up joining either the military or the local police that the British had formed. The Brahmins, who were the teachers most of the time, they didn't know what to do, so they were forced to learn the language, and because that was the only thing they did, they became good at learning the English language. And soon you saw them, as judges and lawyers, and becoming a little bit of a what I would call as a more prosperous part of the society. That part was usually held by the others who were like Mudaliyars and Chettiars. I don't want to get into more detail, but these people were the ones who formed the Justice Party, and their primary plank was that the Brahmins are taking all our jobs, therefore we are there for justice for everybody else. So there was always this thing called Brahmin versus non-Brahmin, and this started in that at that time in 1916, 1917 time frame, and the DMK today is a child of that movement, and they use this thing, and facts be darned, they don't look at the facts, they just keep hammering this, and the way out, in my opinion, this is a little radical, is that the Brahmins have to figure out how do they become bigger than that 1%. You have to find a way that you can say, okay, I am not 1%, I am 23%. How do you do that? There is a way to do this thing. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but I believe many people, many Brahmins are actually going into the interiors of Tamil Nadu, and they are trying to bring about a change in people's mindset and thinking, and trying to take everybody along. In fact, I don't know how many of you remember in 2004, the Kanchi's religious head, the Shankaracharya, was arrested by the Sonia Gandhi government in Hyderabad, near Hyderabad. And the reason she did that was because that Shankaracharya was making it a point to go to communities which were comprising of SCs and STs. He would sit with them, he would eat with them, he would discuss their problems, he would do even a Kumbhabhishekam for their temples. I mean, this was becoming a revolution, and she saw that as something that came in the way of proselytization and conversion of people into Christianity. It took years before he came out of that, but the damage was done. So this is the kind of stuff that is happening in Tamil Nadu, and let's hope that this time around it is done in a more saner way, more efficient way. At least the BJP is in center. They won't do it something like what the UPA government did. I can tell you that government in 10 years has done so much damage. Oh my God, I can't stop. That's how it is. Let's leave it for another day, another discussion. But this is a huge
discussion, and you've written some books also about some of the issues that cropped up at that time. And one of the things that I want to say is that, of course, I think Periyar was one figure that we hear about a lot from the Tamil Nadu politics of those days, 1916 or so that you mentioned, right? And then also that the roots of the movement that are existing in the United States, the language, the tone, tenor is very similar to what you see in the Tamil Nadu politics, They talk of the same things. Equality Labs talks about the Janeu, and, we hear that from Tamil Nadu politics also. Similar sort of, vegetarianism, beef, whatnot, they pull the same sort of tropes and push them onto us. And that same politics from from India is being transposed into the United States, the caste politics. But I think we had a great discussion. If you want to have 1 minute each for, just closing comments, I would love that.
Should I go ahead, or Shriji, you want to go first?
Oh, yes, I should probably.
No, you go ahead, Praveenji. I've been hogging the time. Yeah.
Okay. I will simply say the following, that the challenges we are facing in dismantling Hindutva and the caste-based cases that we saw earlier are real. They're not going to go away. We need to organize ourselves, understand those forces behind them, and take preemptive actions before it's too late. We do know what the next steps for them is. We need to organize ourselves better. And I think a lot of steps are being taken by HAF and other organizations, which will bring out the results. So I'm very optimistic about that. Another thing, that question that came up about the caste being a protected category by the Democratic Party of California, is a very troubling development. And because typically California leads the way, other states follow. The fact that 70% of the Indians vote Democrat and they contribute in very large amounts to the Democratic Party itself is the biggest shame. We need to bring our leaders out to contribute money to put a complete stop to those donations to the Democratic Party till that line is removed. It can be done, it must be done, but our community needs to take steps. It is a serious threat and we should not take it lightly. It should not be ki chalta hai, don't worry about it. No, it is serious and it will go to other states if we do not take preemptive action. So I'll stop here, but I will be optimistic to say that a lot of things are happening. I haven't seen Hindu community more unified now as I've seen before. So hopefully something good will come out with this, and a lot of us are working on that, and we are blessed to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say a couple of things before I hand over to Shriji, that, Pew Research, if you look at how the conversions, they have looked at conversions, and Christians largely dip into the SC/ST pool, So from the British colonial times, that is how the conversion process goes on. So Equality Labs, their first meeting that they had was in a church, So even though they call themselves Equality Labs, they're driven by a certain agenda from certain religious groups. And you mentioned CARE, and I'm mentioning a church. And I know, Artiji wrote about the Khalistani sort of movements in California. So there are certain anti-India forces that are also working towards this. Shriji, please, the floor is yours. Please give us your closing comments.
Yes, and there is one great thing that we all have inherited, being born in Bharatavarsha. Many of us are born, I'm assuming, of course, that all of us are, but perhaps many of us. And we were born with this Sanatana Dharma that is running in our veins. What is Sanatana Dharma? It's eternal flow. We don't know when that flow started. We don't know when it's going to end. We know it is going to be there 1,000 years from now, 10,000 years from now. And what it tells us are very simple things, follow the path of truth, speak the truth, do what is right, simple things. And I believe many of us actually follow this in our lives. So it's important to tell everyone that, look, in heart, spirit, and mind, you are essentially a Sanatani. And this is what it is. This is why it is like this. And let us try and see how best we can explain this philosophy, because it's not a religion. It's a way of life. It's a philosophy. We have to try and say that we are not a religion. That is why you have this open concept. Whichever God you feel like makes you feel spiritual, go ahead and pray with that God. If you don't want to have a God, that also is fine. So this kind of a flexible architecture where it gives you scope, room to contemplate on life. What am I on this earth for? And things like that we can provide. I hope that we do this thing, because as a P Guru's channel founder, this is what has been my goal, to try and take away some of these cobwebs, and hopefully this becomes a more kinder, gentler nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Shriji. That was very philosophical. And that is what Dharma is about. That is what we are about. That is what this conference is about. There may be a hate fest going on parallelly, around here in the United States at this time. We wanted to create positive energy and also, dismantle some of the coloniality that is part of our structural framework, because we have lived 1,200 plus years in colonial rules of either the Mughals or the British. But the cobwebs, like you said, come off at some point and Dharma shines through. And this is that process that we are going through. Even Tariq Fateh, actually, just a few minutes back, talked about the same thing, that truth has to triumph. So we are on the side of truth, and that is our hope, and that is our belief. So, Satyamev Jayate, and I thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful discussion, a topic that, we really, I think, laid out threadbare. Hopefully people appreciate that. Namaste.
Thank you very much.